7th of September 2024 at 2:31 p.m. here on Harstine Island, Washington, United States of America. Welcome once again to our cosmic journey, the Dev and Design podcast chronicling the path that these two dum-dums did to make the world's best astrology software. I'm Dum-Dum Jake. He is Dum-Dum Trey. Hello, Dum-Dum Trey.
Hello, Dum Dum Jake.
We
I,
were
I like your framing of us having already done it. It's very hyper sigil, like talking about the thing that you've already done, even though it hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, I mean,
Good job.
there's the kind of sigilistic, like mesmerizing kind of I'm going to bring this into the world through my deeds and thoughts, the present day
Yeah.
us. But also
Weave your future.
the reason I do that is because the only reason that anyone would ever watch this podcast is because we would have done the thing that we're saying we're doing. Otherwise, there's no reason
Otherwise,
there's to watch
exactly.
this podcast. So you're either here because we did it, or you're here because you're a very good friend, or this podcast should be deleted. Those are the only. We've been canceled
This
due to a
podcast should
lack of
cancel its
interest.
account.
Exactly. How are you feeling? How's it going by you?
Yeah, it's good. It's really good. I think I'm kind of freaking out about the time frame that we have set for ourselves for a beta release.
Oh yeah.
Especially since I've been in the weeds with new perspectives and like a lot of plumbing stuff, which I'll talk about in the demo. We've talked about this before with the sine wave of like there are points where sometimes it feels like, oh, it's all coming together. Like it's, oh my God, look at how cool it is or whatever. And then there's like a lull period where you're like, nothing is moving.
Yeah.
But it is. We're making good progress, and it's good. I'm feeling good. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling great, and I don't want to go into too much detail about that because our checking question might be very much what you had just
Mm,
talked about. And so let me
okay.
just show you the agenda here. It's my checking question today, and much like we did last week, we've got a design demo, and sandwich in between the meat of a dev demo. Mr. Henry, your question is this: if this week had was a astrological aspect between 2 points, planets, bodies, whatever it is, what aspect do you feel like you brought to your work this week? That's your
Mm,
question today.
yeah, that's a good question. I like it. I'm thinking Mercury in relationship to Saturn, almost subterranean back end work that is highly constrained to like a particular domain, but also is just very it like requires a lot of thought and processing. And I think I rewrote code, I don't know, 3 or 4 times for several features this week.
You
So
were making
it
mention
was,
that you had to rewrite things over and over and over this
yeah,
week.
yeah, and the grind for sure. So I'm gonna say like square. Like it was not it was a grindy sort of relationship, but still a relationship. So I'm gonna say Mercury square Saturn.
Nice. I'm saying
How about you?
Mars conjoined Saturn because there was a lot of like the blade, the energy, the heat that was coming in. I worked a ton this week, but also felt like it was always for like it was for a big, I don't know, like a bigger purpose. Like there was something else to it that felt almost like I was sitting in systems all day, and I felt
Mhm.
like I was always like not designing UI, although I have some UI to show. I was designing like what our beta program is going to look like, or what eventually a individual exploration of charts is going to look like one day.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I feel you on that one. It was I think there was a fair amount of meta stuff that happened this cycle too,
Yeah.
which we can talk a little bit about. Like I want to talk about like deployment strategy and some of the things that I learned this week about deployments.
Oh
So
yeah.
anyway,
All that stuff. So
yeah.
let's just talk. Well, I'll do a really quick design demo of the UI that I did, which was around aspects. This is not going to look crazy this way. This is not going to look crazy at all. Like what you're seeing here, I think the craziest thing about this is that we have this symbol for whether this is separating, and we have this symbol for whether it's applying. But for the most part, it's kind of what you get from any other aspect, right? So you get the faster planet, the aspect, the slower planet, whether it's applying or separating, and the degrees that it takes to do that. this is like what it looks like in a list and a little bit bigger. You'll see here that I tried something. You'll see the big red line through it, I, which was means it's bad. I tried something here, which is like maybe having instead of reading it across, like from left to right, you instead read it from top to down. By the way, do left to right, top to down, and in our weird mirror mode, it blows my mind. So thinking about like the moon sextile Mars, and like here's where the moon's at, here's where the Mars is, here's where Mars is at, and this is like the amount that it's applying. This is actually somebody we had a lovely conversation with someone this week who had this. This is what she had elected for, so I wanted to put that in here. But like this doesn't look good. It doesn't read well. I just didn't like it. So anything you would like to talk about with aspects before we move on to dbgraphinfo.ql?
Wow, these company names just write themselves.
Exactly. With
Yeah,
a
I just oh,
with a
right.
brand name like dbgraphinfo.ql, you can't go wrong.
I think that you know what? Actually, the dot plumbing as a TLD for a like database diagramming thing actually makes a ton of
Would
sense.
actually make a whole lot of more sense. It would make more sense
Yeah.
than for astrology software, that's for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Like the db diagram dot plumbing or something, or db dot plumbing. Oh my
Yeah.
god. Anyway, okay. Uh, I just wanted to make a comment on your on there because I really like it. The applying is like, I mean, it was a no-brainer. When I saw that, I was like, yeah, hell yeah, that looks great. The separating one, I was like, I don't know, like maybe that works, maybe it doesn't. And then the more that I've seen it, the more that I'm like, I think it's great.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to be one of those things where, we'll put it in front of people and we'll get feedback on it. Traditionally, applying versus separating is just like A versus S, which we really don't like because we want to lean on semiotics as much as possible and move away from language as much as possible when it comes to representing things symbolically.
Yeah. Like why
Um,
does everything have to be in English all the time, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Like that weird Pluto icon. Have you ever seen that? It's
Yes,
like a
it's a
P with
P with the line on it. I did it backwards correctly, by the way, with my finger. I'm very proud of myself.
good job.
The P.
Anyway, okay, so that's it. That's it.
Yeah,
Just I like it. I like it.
I like it
Good
too.
job.
Thank you. Would you like to talk a little bit about your
Yeah, yeah,
mercurial Saturn aspected database problems?
yeah. Because we talked about last week. We talked about new perspectives. I'm still knee deep in new perspectives, but I dropped our schema into this tool. Just it's fine. But mostly just because I want to point out a couple of things that I think that we did that are kind of cool and clever. We have this idea of um, users having default perspectives, and default perspectives are based upon discipline. So you could say this is like our little perspectives table here. And we have this discipline field, which is something like, natal, electional, things like that. There could be a lot of different ways that we slice and dice discipline, but each user has a number of default perspectives based upon discipline. And then the perspective has a relationship the perspective itself is basically just like a collection of things that say like whole sign houses. So you can imagine like, you have a discipline of maybe electional, like traditional electional, let's say. And then you might have whole sign as an entity in that perspective. We also did, so you can see that there's this little relationship arrow here, which is going from previous version to the ID of the perspective. And what this means is that perspectives have a thing called previous version, which if this value doesn't exist, then you're looking at sort of the most recent. But if this value does exist, then you have a chain of perspective versions. And this is really important because we want to have the ability for when users are updating their perspectives and changing things about their perspective and saving it with the chart, saving it with the rings, etc., that we want to be able to show a history. We want to be able to show differences between like what things changed. And then another thing that we did, and there's been a couple. This is one of the things that got implemented like 3 different ways and then ripped out again, and we decided to try to keep it as simple as possible here. Value in perspective. So normally a perspective entity would say something like whole sign houses, like that's the house system that I'm using, or it'll say like show Pluto, right? Um, in this case, value would be um, like let's say you're using planetary orb, and so you might have an entity which is Jupiter orb, and then it would have a value which would be maybe 12 degrees or 8 degrees or something like that. The other thing that I wanted to briefly mention is that I'm working on a little side project thing that I've been working on for a while, which is around toki pona flashcards. Not relevant at
Yeah.
all to this podcast. However, I'm using the exact same stack that we're using for Cosmic because I wanted to have a low stakes way of trying out our entire deployment workflow. Get application deployed in an actual production environment, be able to get on a console, be able to view logs, be able to share secrets, be able to send emails. So that was another thing that kind of came about this week, sort of in anticipation of getting to an initial deployment of Cosmic, which is terrifying and also awesome.
Yeah, exactly. Nothing in this world is awesome without it being a little bit terrifying and done by people who are a little bit weird. Nothing is
Yeah.
fun when it's standard and normal.
What's
Uh,
that quote? It's the all wait, I'm gonna have it. All progress happens outside the comfort zone.
all progress happens outside the comfort zone. No one's ever done a amazing thing that hasn't been a little bit weird. I think that was another. I'm probably misquoting somebody on that one. We will eventually like have a piece of software that people will be able to use. That piece of software will not be available to everyone to use because there's going to be lots of holes in it and bugs in it. And so what we want to do is do a process which is called beta testing. This is after Trey and I feel like we will not have eminent shame of putting this thing out in the world, that we think that people are going to actually enjoy it, that we then invite people in to use it in a very kind of constrained way and see what feedback we get from it and make changes based on that feedback. And typically in a beta test, you would just kind of stumble your way into a beta test. I'm not a stumbling your way into anything kind of person, kind of guy. And so what you're seeing over here is how I like to think about literally everything, which is taking the best practices and deconstructing that into its component parts, which is what you're seeing here, doing this thing that's called noun foraging. So here are all the nouns and the verbs and the attributes of possible objects that could be part of a beta, doing an affinity diagram of all that stuff, and then marking not kind of, but what are the most important objects that exist in the system, knowing a little bit about what these objects like represent, how they relate to one another, and this is just doing more and more relationship stuff. And the point of this is to think through the complexity of what a beta test would be, how we would want to approach something like a beta test. We could go super complex with it, or we could go super simple with it, but like let's have the discussion about what we want first before we go and do the thing. Otherwise, what ends up happening in these cases sometimes is that you start going down a road and you're too far along and you're like, we're not getting what we need out of this. We're not finding the right people for this kind of thing. We're not getting the feedback. And then we went so fast to get this thing out, but then we didn't get what we needed out of that. And so we had to slow way down or like redo it. And so this is just our way of saying like, how are we going to approach all of this in a way that is a blessing to everybody? I am also as terrified as Trey is feeling about this beta. It's coming up relatively soon. We don't have a date. We're not gonna mention that yet because we don't even have any people for it yet because we haven't even really thought about like the mechanisms for it, as you saw. So we're getting through that now.
Yeah,
Thoughts?
I love it, and I'm really appreciative of your level of rigor around topics like this, like being able to just kind of like bust out. Like you were looking at a book about beta testing that I was like, this book is garbage. I would never even look at it.
Yeah.
And then you took that book and you got all of the good stuff out of it, and then created something that's going to allow us to have a successful beta, if at all possible. And that's amazing.
Here's a pro tip for you. Okay, if you want to like start pulling best practices and you're like, I'm going to go on any subject, find it is very typical for you to before you even buy the book to go and look at either the table of contents or the index. And what I did is I went to Amazon, I pulled the index for this book, and then I just took the index and I looked through that, and I was like doing like the nouns of this thing. Okay, I found some nouns. This book doesn't have to define it for me. I can go find that elsewhere. But then I was like, well, this seems like an interesting topic. This seems like an interesting topic. And what ends up happening in these like small interesting topics is that you get to these like little things like this seems stupid and everything, but just make sure that the test environment has the word beta on it so people understand what that is. That's going to be very important for us when we have a full product and a beta product. Like, people need to know where they're at. Most people don't really know what a beta test is and what it's not, and we can forget that stuff because we use these words very interchangeably, like, or very easily, I should say. Like Trey said, went through the index, highlighted the things. I was like, oh yeah, these are things I have to remember. Pulled that out. It took me like all of 30 minutes. It was a 300-page book that I did not buy, but the index and the table of contents was invaluable to me. So thanks to that.
Yeah, I think it's also useful to, and certainly both of us do this, is lean on AI. So we use ChatGPT a lot for this kind of thing because it's really good for this. Like, summarize this aspect of beta testing is the kinds of things that AI is incredibly good at. So if you have kind of these top level things, you can get like really nice summaries and descriptions of things from AI.
Just take a moment, step back, highlight some stuff, think about things from like a systemic level, very Saturnian. Get in there real quick, slice with Mars, slice it with the sword. There, I tied it back to my checking question. Good for me.
Nice job.
Um, Given that I am so low energy, Mr. Henry, what should the viewer today be doing with their time after so lovingly watching this video of ours?
They should make sure that their note-taking system is really doing a good job of capturing their as being an external brain for them.
Oh my God.
Go through your notes, check your note-taking system. Is it doing the job that you need it to do?
Oh my God. Do we want to talk about this?
No, let's talk about it later.
Okay. I'll just tell you that we now, both Mr. Henry and I, have second husbands, the same second husband, which is a note-taking application that is absolutely amazing, made by Germans, which is shocking because it's good, but also not too tedious. You know, like usually with German stuff, it's like good and tedious. It's just like just tedious enough. I love it. I don't know. Maybe I'm just acting like a German now. Okay, go figure out where your second brain lives. Where does it live? Is it in the cloud? Is it in on a piece of paper? Is it with your spouse? Sometimes people, I'm not saying anything about my spouse, so sometimes my spouse tries to unload his brain onto mine, and I'm like, oh, that's great. Be well. Have yourself a lovely Saturday or whatever day you watch this video, and we're going to talk again very soon. We love you. Take care. Goodbye.